Now, the second edition of the Biashara Africa Forum is underway in Kigali, Rwanda, bringing together leaders from the private and public sectors to explore ways to boost trade in Africa. At the center of today's conversation are issues around harmonizing trade finance regulations on the continent. And joining me for further insight on this is Head of Business Enablement for Business and Commercial Banking at Standard Bank, Andrew Robertson. Thank you so much for your time. And now, firstly, let's actually talk about what trade finance actually entails. And the second part of that question, really the important role that it's set to play in the advancement of the AfCFTA.
Brilliant. It's great to be back. So from a trade finance perspective, a couple of key elements that contribute to trade finance. I think the first one is information and advice.
Okay.
So making sure that SMEs in particular have appropriate information and advice that guide them through how to effectively unlock the opportunities within trade finance.
Okay.
The second piece that that flows out of that is then market access. Many SMEs don't know how to unlock new opportunities in identifying new buyers and suppliers in different markets.
Yeah, beyond their current markets, yeah.
Correct. So once those two elements come together, you start to develop supply chains. And when those supply chains form, you start unlocking simplified trade finance solutions like supply chain finance.
Okay.
And those elements are quite important as the foundational elements of trade finance. The final element is ease of access. Trade finance has been often considered fairly complex.
Yes.
I can't say that it isn't still a little bit complex, but there's lots of work happening to simplify it.
Okay.
So ease of access, how do you enable it digitally? Or provide access to trade expertise as and when required. Now those elements, those four elements, when they come together, that is where the magic of AfCFTA happens. It's not just one thing,
Yes.
it's a combination of elements that will then build confidence within SMEs. And when that confidence builds, the flow of goods intra-Africa wide starts to flow. And that's the benefit to AfCFTA.
Okay, those are really, really interesting pillars there to the kind of trade finance ecosystem that we are, of course, are dealing with. And I will delve deeper into some of those points in our conversation. But I mean, really what today was about was the harmonization of trade finance across the continent. And just from a Standard Bank perspective, because you do have quite a significant presence in Africa in facilitating these kinds of, cross-border investment and trade. What would you say, would you say that there is an urgent need in terms of harmonizing that regulation across the continent?
So let me start off by saying that with 54 member states signed up to AfCFTA, each of them have their own regulations, their own customs practices, tariffs, etc. This was always going to be the difficult and the challenging part of simplifying trade and implementing a free trade area. So there is most definitely a need for harmonization. What is good to see, certainly over the last 2 days, is that there has been progress.
Okay.
We've heard instances where if we draw out just trade tariffs or customs tariffs as two particular examples, one where it worked really well, and the feedback, which is important, that in this test phase is starting to show that the way in which the harmonization is starting to work is positive. So important lessons being learnt. Equally, we have heard examples where there's been some frustrations. So again, it does highlight the point that through harmonization, we have a good opportunity to strongly influence and positively influence the outcome of AfCFTA.
Progress and still frustrations, but would you say even with the frustrations and the friction that governments are willing to actually meet on a policy level to actually get to a point where there is harmony, and maybe also allowing the private sector to help them through those conversations?
Very much so.
Yeah.
Lots of debate over the last 2 days. not just sharing positive anecdotes and good news. It's really about getting into the detail and the meat of the policy initiatives that need to be implemented.
All right. Well, I mean, just talking about small businesses, because we do know that they are the backbone of African economies, and successful trade of, and also the expansion of those businesses across the continent is very pivotal in terms of the success of the CFTA. So what currently hinders SMEs at this point, and actually what solutions are you looking at in terms of them accessing that trade finance?
So the first piece, again, comes back to that information and advice component. As a bank, we talk about Africa as our home, we drive her growth.
Yeah.
We understand these markets intimately. We understand the economies, we understand the value chains, and so as an organization, certainly we're uniquely positioned to support SMEs access the right information at the right times in order to meet their growth aspirations. When that combines then with our expertise in trade instruments, with banking instruments, with payment platforms, again, we're able to seamlessly facilitate the way in which business owners can access new markets. And then the final piece, all of these elements come together in supply chains. And that's where we're now starting to make progress in supply chain finance, as an example. And that just makes it that much easier for small businesses to access that last element in the chain, which is, how do I finance my growth?
And it's also what they need, just tailoring of those solutions where not one size fits all.
Correct. And that's our learning. Across Africa, each market is different. The solutions are different, but equally the opportunities are substantial.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time and for your insights today, Andrew, and for joining us in studio. That was Andrew Robertson, Head of Business and Enablement at Standard Bank Business and Commercial Banking.